Hello YouTubers, and welcome to my video on national security and electric vehicles. One of the biggest things that is often left out of the electric vehicle debate is the importance of electric vehicles for national security. Now, all the information that I'm presenting I've gotten from the U.S. Energy Information Administration website. I did include links in the description below so you can actually see the information for yourself. In 2016, this is how much oil we imported. Yes, folks, that is the number of barrels of oil that we imported for 2016. This is how much gas that Americans have used every single day in 2016. 392 million gallons of gas. Now, considering there's 374 million Americans in the United States, that averages out to a little over a gallon of gas per person per day. To kind of break down our gasoline usage, this is how it breaks down for 2016. 60% of the total transportation sector energy consumption was for gasoline. That is 48% of all petroleum consumption. Now, 17% of that, or 17% of U.S. energy consumption includes aviation gasoline, motor gasoline, and fuel ethanol. 90% of all gasoline consumption goes to light-duty vehicles. That is cars, SUVs, and small trucks. So most of that is the cars that you see on the road. Now, only 10% of that gas usage goes towards small aircraft gasoline, electric generators for portable and emergency power, and for power supply and equipment, and tools used in farming, landscaping, construction, and forestry. Now, diesel only accounts for 21% of petroleum consumption by the U.S. transportation sector. A lot of petroleum consumption oftentimes goes to power generators for remote locations that may not have access to power grids like we do. And that would be, for example, remote villages in Alaska. Also, too, Hawaii is also very dependent on diesel generators to produce electricity. So imagine if we took the petroleum equation out. So let's say we greatly reduced our usage of petroleum. And let's start with the transportation sector. Going back to what I mentioned earlier, 90% of all gasoline consumptions is for light-duty vehicles. So let's start taking cars out of the equation. That would be the first thing. And then SUVs, trucks. There's a lot of potential when it comes to electric vehicles as it applies to trucks. One of the great things about electric vehicles is instant torque. Electric vehicles would be a great asset when it comes to hauling livestock, farm equipment, and let's face it, some Americans just love their trucks. So electric vehicles have the potential to greatly change our lives. Now, the next biggest thing, of course, is heavy duty trucks. And that would be things like semis. As you know, Tesla has announced that they plan on working on an electric semi. Also, Nikola has also been working on an electric semi as well. Now, with that accomplishment of electric semi, there is a lot of potential to greatly reduce our dependence on oil. Now, if the fuel by the numbers doesn't get your attention, then think about this. In March of this year, the Saudis purchased one of the largest oil refineries in the United States. Being the largest oil refinery, it's also on the Gulf Coast. And that's probably one of our biggest vulnerabilities when it comes to gasoline supply, is the fact that there are a number of refineries on the Gulf Coast. And as we know, every year there's hurricane season. There is always that potential that there could be a catastrophic storm impact an area where a refinery is located. What could that do to our national gasoline supply? Think about what happened in the 70s. People will oftentimes deny we will see gas shortages like we did in the 70s. I believe there is always that possibility. There have been several incidences where people have not been able to get fuel for their vehicles. Think about what happened just recently when one of the pipelines was leaking. There were gas shortages in the South. People were lucky to try to find a place that had gasoline, or if there was a place that did have gasoline, there was often long lines for people to get fuel. With electric vehicles, there is that possibility we could provide fuel that is self-sustaining. Think about it. Wind power, solar power, coal, nuclear power. Those are things that that's power that we produce ourselves. Also too, with solar roofs and solar panels and the Tesla, things like the Tesla battery wall, where people are able to get solar energy and store that energy and be able to use that to fuel their vehicles and or their home. There is always that potential that Americans could be self-sustaining. Now, one of the biggest things I always talk about is Americans' addiction to oil. The first step in any type of addiction is to admit that there is a problem. Americans don't want to admit that we are addicted to oil. The second step is, what are we, meaning individual Americans, going to do to reduce our oil consumption? It's not something that only one person can do or a few people can do. It's going to take a village to break the oil addiction. And it's not only and it's for our best interest as a national security to make sure that we get that addiction broken. To the fact that when it comes to oil production, that the oil that we used is oil that we produce, and that we don't have to import oil. And that's something I would like to see us as a country get to. Electric vehicles is a big part of that. But a part of that is commitment from companies to develop vehicles that are able to run electricity, as well as to be able to produce products to meet the needs of this country, to produce farming vehicles that are not reliant on oil, to produce trucks, to produce big vehicles such as tractors that run electricity. We have that capability. Also too, it's a big thing is consumer demand. A lot of people are afraid of electricity. People are afraid of electric vehicles. They're afraid of the unknown. And I always like to use the analogy of back in the horse and buggy days. When cars first came out, people were very reluctant to give up their horse and buggy to these fancy smancy new vehicles. But cars became contagious. And it's the same thing with electric vehicles. The biggest advocate, I think, for electric vehicles are their owners. But part of it is car manufacturers need to build cars that people want. So it's not only up to Americans to change their habits, but it's up to car companies to develop electric vehicles that people want. Also, too, oil companies need to stop thinking in terms of oil and become energy companies. It was recently BP announced that they're going to start putting charging stations at their service stations. Why? Because a lot of countries in Europe are moving away from gasoline. There are several countries that are banning petrol or gasoline vehicles and eventually will ban all sales of gasoline or diesel vehicles. Pretty soon, the only vehicle you'll be able to buy in some countries is electric only. A lot of that has to do with energy dependence, but also some may have environmental reasons. Now, whenever I argue about electric vehicles, I always kind of argue about the thing that everybody can agree on. And I'm sure as all of us as Americans, we can agree on one thing, is national security. And where we put our money, meaning where we're buying our oil from, is a big part of that national security. If we cut our dependence on foreign oil and move more towards domestic energy, then it's a win-win situation. The world is changing. A lot of people may be scared of the fact that, for generations, their family may have worked in one particular industry, whether it's coal or the oil industry. But like with anything throughout history, as progress comes, things change. And sometimes it's hard for people to adapt to the new up and coming things. For companies like the oil companies to survive, they need to change with the changing times. Same way with car companies. Electric vehicles are coming. Now, car companies may fight it tooth and nail, but Tesla is creating a revolution. And there's always that one person that creates that revolution throughout history. When I think about Tesla and the big car companies preventing sales from Tesla in certain states, I often go back to think about Henry Ford. And Henry Ford wanted to revolutionize the car industry. He was fought by tooth and nail by the car manufacturers because they were scared about his ideas. Same thing with Tesla. My prediction is that with the change that Tesla is creating, we will become a more safer country. I hope you enjoy this video. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you're interested in seeing more videos, subscribe to my channel. Also too, I did include the links to the information, the source of the information that I used in this video. I also include a link for a referral code if you're interested in or know anybody who's interested in gaining $1,000 credit towards a new Model S or Model X, as well as unlimited free supercharging. Have a great day, everyone.